In the busy city of Lagos, there lived a man named Chike Obafemi. He was a billionaire known for his power, wealth, and silence. People called him the man with the golden touch, but behind his success was a quiet sadness. His mansion stood tall with shining glass windows and marble floors, but it felt cold. Chike had no wife, no children, and very few friends. Every day he went to work, came back home, ate alone, and went to bed. His staff respected him deeply, but they also feared him. He rarely smiled, and no one dared to ask him about his life. One bright Monday morning, a young woman named Amara came to the mansion's gate. She looked nervous but hopeful. She had come from a small village far away, carrying only a small bag and a folded letter of recommendation from her church. Her clothes were plain and her shoes worn, but her eyes shone with quiet determination. She needed this job badly. Her mother was sick, and the medicine cost more than she could afford. The gatekeeper looked her up and down. "You want to work here?" he asked with a smirk. "This is the Obafemi mansion, not a village market." Amara bowed her head politely. "Please, sir. I can clean, cook, and wash. I only need a chance." The gatekeeper sighed and called the housekeeper, Madame Ruth, a tall woman who had worked for Chike for years. Madame Ruth studied Amara carefully. There was something peaceful about the girl, a kind of quiet strength. "Follow me," she said finally. "Let's see what you can do." Inside the mansion, Amara was amazed. The chandeliers sparkled, the walls were covered with paintings, and the air smelled like expensive perfume. She had never seen such beauty before. But she reminded herself why she was there, not to admire but to work. Madame Ruth led her to the staff quarters and gave her a mop and bucket. "You'll start in the main hall," she said. "And be careful, the master doesn't like noise." Amara nodded. She began cleaning, humming softly to herself. Her movements were gentle, her hands steady. By noon the floors were shining. Madame Ruth was surprised. "You work well," she said. "You can stay." That evening Amara sat on her bed, whispering a short prayer of thanks. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She promised herself she would do her best, for her mother, for her future. Days passed quickly. Amara woke up before sunrise and worked until late at night. She cleaned the floors, polished the silver, and made sure every corner sparkled. The other maids didn't like her much. They thought she was too quiet, too humble. "Look at her," one of them whispered. "Acting like she owns the place." Another laughed. "Wait until the master yells at her. Then she'll run back to her village." But Amara didn't reply. She smiled and continued her work. She believed that kindness always returned one way or another. One morning as she was cleaning near the staircase, she saw a tall man coming down. His steps were slow and firm. It was Chike Obafemi himself. Amara quickly bowed her head. She had heard stories about him, how strict he was, how he never smiled, how his voice could silence a whole room. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, clutching her mop. He paused and looked at her. "You're new," he said in his deep, calm voice. "Yes, sir. I started last week." He nodded slightly. "Carry on." That was all he said before walking away. But in that brief moment, Chike noticed something unusual. Unlike the others, this maid didn't tremble or look frightened. She simply spoke with respect and calmness. He found that different. Later that day he asked Madame Ruth quietly, "The new girl, what's her name?" "Her name is Amara, sir," she replied. "She's from the village. Very hard-working, very polite." Chike didn't say anything else, but something about that name stayed in his mind. Over the next few weeks, Amara continued to do her job with quiet dedication. She never argued, never gossiped, and never complained. She even helped the older maids with their tasks. When the cook fell ill, she volunteered to help in the kitchen. Her jollof rice became the staff's favorite meal. One evening as the staff were eating dinner, Amara sat apart, writing a small note. It was for her mother. She wrote every week, sending letters home through the village driver. In her letter, she told her mother not to worry, that she was safe and working hard, and that soon she would send money for her medicine. That night, Madame Ruth found her in the kitchen cleaning the counters long after everyone else had gone to bed. "Child, you'll wear yourself out," she said kindly. Amara smiled. "I don't mind, Ma. I like keeping things clean. It helps me think." Madame Ruth chuckled. "You remind me of myself when I was young. Just don't let anyone take advantage of that good heart of yours." Amara nodded, not knowing that the man who owned the house had quietly stopped at the doorway and overheard their conversation. Chike stood there for a moment, watching her. The girl worked with care as if every task mattered. It had been a long time since he had seen such sincerity. Something about her reminded him of his late mother, gentle, hard-working, and full of faith. He walked away silently, but for the first time in years, he felt a small warmth inside his chest. By the end of that month, everyone in the mansion knew that the new maid was different. The house seemed brighter when she was around. The other workers, even the rude ones, began to change little by little. Amara's kindness had a way of touching hearts without words. But what Amara didn't know was that her quiet strength and good heart would soon draw her into something far beyond her imagination, something that would change her life forever, and even touch the cold heart of the billionaire himself. That night, as she stood by the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, she whispered a prayer. God, thank you for bringing me here. I don't know what you have planned, but I trust you. Inside the mansion, Chaik stood by his window looking down at the same lights. He didn't know why, but for the first time in many years, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. And so, two very different lives, one of wealth and one of struggle, quietly crossed paths under the same roof, unaware that their destinies had just begun to intertwine. Days passed and Amara worked quietly as always. She cleaned the rooms, polished the furniture, and made sure the mansion stayed spotless. Everyone in the house noticed how peaceful she was. She never argued or shouted. When someone was rude, she smiled and walked away. Her gentle heart made her different from the others. Even Madame Ruth, who was usually strict, had begun to admire her. One hot afternoon, the sun burned bright over Lagos. Amara went outside to clean the garden. She liked working there because the flowers reminded her of home. The gardener had just finished spraying the plants and left his tools nearby. Amara picked up her broom and began sweeping the walkway, humming softly. But a strange smell filled the air. She frowned and covered her nose. The gardener had forgotten to close the lid of a strong chemical spray. The smell was sharp like burning plastic. Before she could move away, she inhaled too much. Her head spun, her chest tightened, and the broom slipped from her hands. She tried to call for help, but her voice wouldn't come out. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was the tall trees above her swaying gently in the wind, and then everything went dark. Inside the mansion, one of the guards noticed her lying still on the ground. Madame Ruth? The maid. Something's wrong, he shouted. Within seconds people ran out, guards, cooks, and maids. They gathered around her in panic, but no one knew what to do. Just then, Chaik returned home from a business meeting. As he stepped out of his car, he saw the crowd. His heart raced. What is going on here? He demanded. Sir, it's the new maid Amara, one of the guards said breathlessly. She collapsed. Without hesitation, Chaik pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. Her face was pale, her breathing faint. He checked her pulse, weak but still there. Call the driver. Start the car, he ordered. But before they could move her, her breathing stopped for a second. Chaik froze. No, he whispered. He quickly leaned down and began giving her mouth-to-mouth, trying to get air into her lungs. The staff gasped, but he didn't care who was watching. All that mattered was saving her life. After a few moments, Amara coughed weakly and opened her eyes. She blinked in confusion, her lips trembling. Sir, what happened? She whispered. Chaik sighed with relief. You fainted, he said softly. You're safe now. The guards lifted her carefully and took her inside. Madame Ruth followed closely, holding Amara's hand. They laid her on the couch, gave her water, and opened the windows to let in fresh air. Chaik stood nearby, watching silently. After a while, she sat up slowly. Her head still spun, but she managed a small smile. Thank you, sir, she said weakly. He nodded. You should rest. Don't work until you feel strong again. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed what had happened. She had fainted in front of everyone, and her boss, the billionaire himself, had saved her. She felt embarrassed but also grateful. She whispered a prayer for him before closing her eyes. The next morning, however, the mansion was full of whispers. Everywhere Amara went, people stared. When she entered the kitchen, two maids stopped talking and giggled. When she walked past the hallway, the guards looked at her strangely. Finally, she asked one of the younger maids, Is something wrong? The girl looked around nervously and whispered, Everyone is talking about you. They said the boss kissed you in the garden. Amara's eyes widened. What? That's not true. He saved me, I couldn't breathe. The girl shrugged. I know, but that's what people are saying. Amara felt her heart drop. She rushed outside, hoping to find Madame Ruth. Ma, she said quickly, people are saying wrong things about me. Madame Ruth frowned. What things? They said Mr. Chaik kissed me. The older woman sighed heavily. Ah, these people and their mouths. Don't worry, my dear. Truth doesn't hide forever. But the gossip didn't stop. It spread faster than fire. By afternoon, even the driver and the cook were whispering about it. Amara tried to ignore them, but their looks made her feel ashamed. She wanted to explain, but no one wanted to listen. At lunch, she sat alone at the end of the staff table, pushing her food around. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "God, you know what happened," she whispered. "Please clear my name." Meanwhile, upstairs in his study, Chaik heard the rumors too. His assistant came in nervously and said, "Sir, there's been some talk among the staff. They say you—" "I know," Chaik interrupted, his voice calm but cold. "They think I kissed her." The assistant nodded silently. Chaik leaned back in his chair. For a moment he said nothing. Then he stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the garden where it had all happened. "I saved her life," he said quietly. "And now they turn it into gossip." He shook his head in disappointment. "Call everyone to the main hall," he said suddenly. Minutes later, all the staff gathered there, whispering nervously. Amara stood at the back, her hands shaking. When Chaik entered, the room went silent. His presence alone was enough to make everyone stand straight. He looked around slowly. "I have heard what some of you have been saying," he began. His voice was calm but firm. "A young woman almost died yesterday. I helped her because it was the right thing to do. It was not a kiss. It was first aid." No one dared to speak. He continued, "If anyone in this house thinks it's a joke to spread lies about saving a life, you can leave now." The room was silent except for the sound of breathing. Some of the workers lowered their heads in shame. Chaik turned to Amara, who stood trembling. His voice softened. "You did nothing wrong. You are safe here." Her eyes filled with tears, but she managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir." He gave a small nod and walked out of the hall. After he left, everyone turned to Amara, but this time their faces were full of guilt. No one spoke another word about the rumor again. Madame Ruth placed a hand on Amara's shoulder and said quietly, "You see? Truth always finds its way." That evening, as Amara sat by her window, she thought about everything that had happened. The gossip had hurt her deeply, but something about the way Chaik defended her made her heart feel warm. He was not just a rich man. He was a man with a heart, a man who had saved her without hesitation. In his study, Chaik sat in silence thinking of her too. He couldn't explain why he cared so much about what she thought of him, but he knew one thing, that young Maid had touched something in him he had long forgotten: compassion. The house was quiet again, but something had changed between them, something that neither of them could name yet. When Chaik heard the rumors about him and Amara, his heart burned with anger. He was not the kind of man who liked gossip. He lived a quiet life, respected by many, and he valued his dignity above all. But what hurt him most was seeing how sad and embarrassed Amara looked. She had done nothing wrong, yet she walked with her head down, avoiding everyone. The next morning, Chaik decided to put an end to the matter. He ordered all the workers to gather in the main hall. The maids, guards, and cooks all came, whispering to each other in fear. Amara stood at the back, her hands shaking, her eyes fixed on the floor. When Chaik entered, the room became silent. His deep voice broke the silence. "I have heard what people have been saying," he said firmly. "A young woman almost lost her life and I saved her. There is no shame in helping someone in danger." His voice was calm, but it carried power. "If any of you believe lies or enjoy spreading them, you can leave this house right now." No one moved. Everyone stood quietly, afraid to even breathe too loud. Then Chaik looked at Amara. His tone softened. "You did nothing wrong. You are not the one who should be ashamed. You showed courage and hard work every day in this house. You deserve respect." Amara couldn't stop the tears that rolled down her cheeks. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you, sir." After that day, the mansion became quiet again. No one dared to talk behind her back anymore. And Chaik, who once ignored most of his workers, began to notice her more. He saw how she woke up early every morning before sunrise to clean. He noticed how she took care of others, even when they had laughed at her before. One time, when a guard hurt his hand, she ran to get medicine for him. Another time, she helped Madame Ruth, who was sick with fever, by cooking her soup and sitting beside her all night. Chaik watched her from a distance. Her kindness wasn't loud, it was soft and sincere. And that was what made it powerful. As days passed, he began talking to her sometimes. At first, it was just simple questions about the house. "Are the flowers watered?" Or, "Did you eat?" But soon, their conversations became more personal. One evening, while walking through the garden, he found her trimming the roses. "You like flowers?" he asked. She smiled shyly. "Yes, sir. They remind me of my mother." She used to plant flowers behind our small hut. Chaik nodded slowly. You miss her? Amara's smile faded a little. Every day, she said softly. But I believe she prays for me. That night, for the first time in a long time, Chaik thought about family, about the people he had lost and how lonely his big mansion felt. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Amara was sitting quietly behind the mansion, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders trembled as she cried softly. She had just received a letter from home. Her mother was very sick. The doctor said she needed treatment quickly, but the cost was too high. Amara had no money left to send. She thought about all her hard work, the long hours, the tired nights, yet she still couldn't help the one person who meant the world to her. Her heart broke. Chaik was walking nearby when he saw her. He stopped for a moment, watching her cry. He had never seen her so weak. Slowly, he walked closer and asked gently, Amara, what's wrong? She quickly wiped her face. Nothing, sir. I'm fine. But he frowned. You're not fine. Tell me the truth. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak but stopped. Finally, she whispered, It's my mother, sir. She's very sick. The doctor said she needs medicine and care, but I don't have the money. Chaik's expression softened. How much do you need? Amara shook her head quickly. Please, sir, I'm not asking for money. I'll find a way. He said nothing more. He just looked at her quietly, then nodded. Go inside and rest, he said. That evening, when everyone had gone to bed, Chaik sat in his office and thought about her. He imagined her mother lying sick in a small hut somewhere far away. He thought about how Amara had always worked without complaint, how she helped others even when she had little. Without telling anyone, he made a phone call to his accountant. Send some money to this hospital in Enugu, he said, reading the address from the letter Amara had dropped earlier. Take care of everything, treatment, food, whatever they need. The next morning, Amara received a call from the hospital. Her mother was getting the best care and had already started feeling better. She was shocked. Who paid for it? She asked. The nurse smiled and said, A man named Mr. Chaiko Bafemi. Tears filled Amara's eyes instantly. She could hardly breathe. She ran straight to the mansion, searching for him. When she found him in the garden, she fell to her knees. Sir, you did this? She asked softly. Chaik looked up from his book. Your mother's health is important, he said simply. Her voice shook. Sir, I'll never forget your kindness. You've done more for me than I can ever repay. He smiled faintly, a small, rare smile. You remind me that money isn't everything, Amara, he said. Sometimes it's what we do with it that matters. Amara lowered her head, trying to hold back her tears. God bless you, sir, she whispered. From that day, something changed between them. Chaik no longer saw her as just a maid. He saw her as a woman of courage, faith, and warmth, someone who carried light even in her pain. He began spending more time around her. When she worked in the garden, he sometimes joined her, pretending to check the plants but secretly enjoying her company. He liked how she laughed softly when birds landed on the fence. He liked the way she spoke, always humble, never proud. And Amara, though she respected him deeply, began to see another side of him too. Beneath his serious face, she found a kind man, a man who cared, who helped without expecting thanks. The mansion, once cold and silent, slowly began to feel alive again. The workers noticed that their boss smiled more often. Madame Ruth would say quietly, This maid has brought peace into this house. At night, when Amara prayed, she always thanked God for her mother's healing, and for the man who had made it possible. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Kindness could build bridges between hearts, no matter how different their worlds were. And as Chaik stood by his window one evening watching her walk across the garden, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. The warmth of care, the beginning of something he couldn't explain, something gentle yet powerful. Weeks passed quietly, and peace finally returned to the Obafemi mansion. Amara's mother recovered fully and often sent blessings to the man who had helped her. Amara became more cheerful, and her gentle spirit seemed to bring light into every corner of the house. The other workers who once laughed at her, now respected her deeply. They saw how humble and kind she was, never proud, never angry. Even Chaik had changed. The man who once walked with a cold face now smiled at the smallest things. He laughed softly when the cook made a mistake, and he no longer scolded the guards for minor errors. Everyone noticed the difference, but no one dared to ask why. It was because of Amara. Every time he saw her, Chaik felt something calm in his heart. He couldn't explain it. She had become a quiet part of his life, not loud, not demanding, just present, like the morning sun that slowly warms the day. One evening after dinner, the workers gathered in the garden. They laughed and sang softly as the cool night breeze passed through the flowers. Normally, Chike never joined such moments. But that night something pulled him there. When he stepped into the garden, everyone went silent. The guards and maids stood up quickly, unsure what to do. But Chike waved his hand and said with a small smile, "Relax. Continue." The workers looked at each other in surprise. The cook, an elderly man named Baba Kunnal, began to clap and laugh again. Someone handed Chike a chair, and he sat under the big mango tree watching them sing. Amara was sitting a few feet away, smiling as the younger maids clapped along. She looked up and caught Chike's eyes. He smiled faintly and she quickly looked down, blushing. For the first time in a long while, Chike felt like part of a family. He didn't feel like the lonely billionaire everyone feared. He felt human again. Later that night, when everyone had gone to sleep, he stood at his window looking out at the garden. The flowers swayed in the moonlight, and he remembered the day Amara had fainted there, the day he almost lost her. A strange feeling came over him. That moment, he realized how deeply her presence had changed his world. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew quietly. Whenever he saw her working, he found himself wanting to talk to her. Sometimes he brought her small gifts, a new apron, a book, or flowers from the garden. She always accepted them with a shy smile, never asking for more. One morning, he saw her teaching the younger maids how to read in the kitchen. He stood by the door listening. Her voice was soft and patient, full of care. The girls giggled when they made mistakes, but Amara never scolded them. She encouraged them instead. That night, when Chike sat at his desk, he couldn't focus on his work. He kept thinking about her. Finally, he made a decision. He wanted to speak his heart. Not about wealth or work, but about what truly mattered. So, a few evenings later, he sent for her. The same garden where she had once fainted now looked different. The flowers were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the night air. The sky was clear, and the moonlight made everything glow softly. Amara came quietly, dressed in her simple gown. She looked a little nervous but bowed politely. "You asked to see me, sir?" she said gently. Chike smiled slightly. "Yes, Amara. Sit down, please." She hesitated but obeyed, sitting on the bench beside him. The garden was silent except for the soft chirping of crickets. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Chike took a slow breath. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, sir. It's where I fainted." He looked around the garden and said softly, "That day I thought you were gone. I had never felt fear like that before." Amara's eyes widened. "Fear?" He nodded. "Yes. I was afraid of losing you, someone who brought light into this house without even trying." She looked down shyly. "I only did my duty, sir." Chike smiled. "You did more than that. You changed everything. You see, Amara, when you came here, this house was empty. There was no joy, no laughter. I thought money could fill the silence, but I was wrong. You filled it, with kindness." Amara's heart beat faster. She had never heard such words from him. She tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. Chike continued, his voice soft and calm. "That day when I helped you breathe again, I thought I was saving your life. But since then you've saved mine, from loneliness." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Sir?" she whispered. He looked at her gently. "You don't need to call me sir, any more when we are alone. Just Chike." Amara shook her head quickly, embarrassed. "I can't, sir. You are my employer." He smiled again. "Maybe. But sometimes life surprises us. You were sent here for a reason, Amara. Not just to work, but to remind me what really matters." She looked up, meeting his eyes. They were warm, filled with something she had never seen before, tenderness. For a moment they both sat quietly. The wind rustled the flowers. A butterfly landed near her hand and she smiled softly. Chike watched her with a quiet admiration. "You see that?" he said. "Even nature likes you." She laughed softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "No, sir. Maybe it just feels peace here." He nodded slowly. "Peace, that's what you brought into my life." The silence that followed was gentle, not heavy. It was full of meaning, the kind that didn't need words. After a while, Amara stood up slowly. "Thank you, sir, for everything you've done, for my mother, for me. I will never forget your kindness." Chike stood too, looking at her closely. "And I'll never forget yours, Amara. You showed me that love doesn't need wealth. It just needs a heart." Her lips parted, but she couldn't find any words to say. All she could do was smile, her heart warm and full. As she turned to leave, Chike said softly, "Good night, Amara." She turned back, smiling shyly. "Good night, sir." After she walked away, Chaik stood there alone in the garden for a long time watching the stars. For the first time he didn't feel lonely. He felt hope, gentle and new like the first light of dawn. From that night onward, something quiet but strong grew between them, respect, warmth and a bond neither could deny. And though neither spoke of love yet, both knew that something beautiful had begun under the moonlight in that garden. From that day, everything in the Obafemi mansion began to change. Amara was no longer treated as just another maid. She became a part of the family, the heart that kept the house warm. The other workers noticed it first. The mansion, once filled with silence, now echoed with laughter and joy. Even the air felt lighter, as if peace had finally returned. Chaik, who had lived for years surrounded by wealth but no happiness, now found reasons to smile. He looked forward to mornings because he would hear Amara's soft voice greeting everyone cheerfully. The maids stopped gossiping about her. Instead, they admired how she carried herself with grace and humility. When anyone made a mistake, Amara was the first to help, never judging or shouting. One afternoon she gathered all the workers and said kindly, "We can make this house feel like a home if we all care for one another." Her words touched their hearts. From that day, everyone worked not out of fear but out of respect and love. Even the guards began to smile more. Chaik noticed how much peace she had brought. Before she came, his days were filled with meetings, phone calls and numbers. Now, he found himself pausing to watch the sunset or listen to the laughter of his staff. He often stood quietly at the balcony, looking down at the garden where everything had begun, the same garden where he once saved Amara's life. One evening, Amara saw him standing there, lost in thought. "Sir," she said softly, "you've been standing there for a while. Are you all right?" He turned to her and smiled gently. "I'm fine, Amara. I was just thinking about how different things are now." She smiled too. "Different can be good, sir?" "Yes," he said. "Especially when it comes with peace." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the evening sky turn orange and gold. It felt calm, simple but meaningful. Over the next few months, Chaik began supporting Amara's dreams. He discovered that she wanted to help children from poor villages like hers. She often spoke about the kids who didn't have shoes or books. "If I ever have enough," she once said shyly, "I'll open a small school for them." The next morning, Chaik called her to his office. "Amara," he said, "I've been thinking about your dream." Her eyes widened. "My dream?" He nodded. "Yes. You said you wanted to help children. I want to help you make that happen." She was speechless. "Sir, you've already done so much for me. I can't ask for more." "You didn't ask," he said kindly. "But I believe in you." Tears filled her eyes. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." Chaik smiled. "I know you will." Within weeks they began working on the project together. Chaik handled the funding, while Amara chose the location and gathered teachers. It was a small school at first, just 3 classrooms and a playground, but it meant everything to her. She named it the Sunrise Academy, saying it reminded her of hope and new beginnings. When the school opened, the children from the nearby villages ran in laughing, their faces bright with joy. Amara helped them read and write, while Chaik stood quietly watching her from a distance. He felt proud, not just because of the school but because of the woman who had inspired it. That evening they sat under the mango tree in the schoolyard. Amara looked at him and said softly, "You've given me more than I ever dreamed of, sir." He shook his head. "No, Amara. You gave me more. You taught me what it means to live." Her heart felt warm. She smiled shyly, unable to look him in the eyes. "I only did what felt right." Chaik laughed softly. "You always say that. But what you do goes beyond right. You've changed me." She looked up at him. "Changed you?" "Yes," he said. "I used to think love was a weakness. I thought kindness was for the poor. But you showed me that it's what makes life rich." Amara's eyes glistened with emotion. "Maybe we were both meant to save each other." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe we were." From that day their bond grew stronger. People began to notice how close they had become, but it wasn't gossip anymore. It was admiration. Everyone saw the respect and quiet care they shared. Even the workers whispered, "Madame Amara has brought light into the boss's life." Months later, Chaik held a small celebration at the mansion. The entire staff and many of the villagers were invited. The school children sang songs of gratitude, and Amara stood beside Chaik, smiling proudly. When it was his turn to speak, Chaik looked at everyone and said, "Before Amara came, I had everything but peace. She didn't just work here, she changed this home and taught me to see life differently. I am grateful to her. Everyone clapped and cheered. Amara stood quietly beside him, her heart full of joy and humility. That night, when the guests had left and the house was quiet again, Chike found her sitting in the garden. The moonlight shone softly on her face. "You're quiet," he said. She smiled. "I'm just thinking. Life can change so fast. I came here looking for work, but I found something far greater." Chike nodded. "Yes. And I found something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that, sir?" she asked softly. "Peace," he said simply. "And love." Amara looked away shyly, her heart beating faster. "You're too kind." He smiled. "No, just honest." For a while they sat in silence again, listening to the sound of the night. The same garden that once witnessed fear and pain now stood as a symbol of peace and love. Over time, the people of Lagos began to speak about them, the kind billionaire and the maid with a golden heart. But Amara never let her new place change her. She still greeted everyone kindly, still helped the cooks, and still visited the school every week. One morning when the press asked her, "How does it feel to be part of a billionaire's life?" she simply smiled and said, "I'm still the same village girl who believes that kindness can change the world." Her words touched hearts across the city. And so, Amara, the poor maid who was once mocked and ignored, became the woman who taught a billionaire how to smile, how to love, and how to live again. Her journey was not written in gold, but in goodness. And her story became a reminder that true wealth is not found in money, but in the heart that gives without expecting anything in return. The once empty mansion now echoed with laughter, music, and warmth, all because of one humble woman who brought life back into it. The poor maid who was once looked down upon became the light in a rich man's world. And through her, even the coldest heart learned that kindness is the greatest treasure of all. The end.